It is time to get started. So let's get going, and we'll get started, and people will join us as need be. So my name is Chris Lemma. I work at a company called Liquid Web, and you are here for this presentation, which is getting ready for Gutenberg. If you are in the right place, then you should be seeing a slide that says "Getting Ready for Gutenberg" on your screen. And we're going to get started here talking about Gutenberg. Of course, if we are talking about Gutenberg, the first thing people want to know is, what is Gutenberg? And the best way that I can explain it, which is different than the way other people may explain it, is that it is a block-based layout engine. And you go, whoa, hold on a second. I didn't know we're talking about engines. Yes, it is a block-based layout engine. Now, what you will most often hear is it's a new editor. And that is not incorrect. There's a lot of people talking about it as an editor. But the reality of the situation is that there's a lot more going on than just trying to make sure you have some sort of cool new editor with drag and drop or something like that, right? The point is, underneath the hood, what folks have been working on, and the whole team of people have been doing this, is working on an underlying infrastructure that changes everything to blocks. And we're going to talk about that in this presentation. But that's why I say this is more than just your little editor screen. It's a pretty big change, and it is a change that's not only interesting but could be really, really, really powerful. So block-based layout engine, that's what we're going to talk about. A lot of people talk about it as a new page builder, right? And that's what I was referencing. They talk about it as a new page builder. I've heard countless people go, well, once Gutenberg's here, you won't need page builders. That may or may not be true, but that's really not the point, right? This is a refactoring, in my opinion, and of course, everything I share is going to be my opinion. But in my opinion, this is the cleanest and easiest way that they've gone after. A whole group of people have gone after refactoring an entire platform. And when you start thinking about that, right? When you start thinking about how would you, if you were in charge of this open source project, how would you go about making fundamental changes to so many different things? You would likely come back to, well, the easiest place to start would be, how do we fix and deliver some valued improvements to customers? And so there's a nice, easy way to do that in the content editor, and that will help it stay competitive with Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, and whatever else. And you go, yeah, oh, that's good, but this has all the hallmarks of a complete refactor, because it's going deep underneath the core of WordPress and saying, okay, now how do we fix some of the things that have been sitting there as a challenge this whole time, right? And so, yeah, you'll definitely hear people talk about this as it's the new editor. It's the new editor. I think we're going to discover over the course of time that there's a lot more going on than that. And why do I say that? Well, today you can use, right, shortcodes. If you want something to happen on the screen, you can use shortcodes, right? And some of you have, and many of you have purchased a plugin or a theme that comes with a whole host of shortcodes. And if you don't know this, right, shortcodes are just, it's just, we've just basically taught customers, people who are content creators, we've taught them that if you put these brackets around stuff, you can trigger any kind of code you want, that's registered in someone's plugin. And you go, oh, okay, well, that seems like it's a powerful tool that could go sideways, and it has, right? So there are several themes or plugins that have gone way overboard on shortcodes, and what's going on behind the scenes is every time you process that shortcode, you're sending essentially an instruction to a server to go find the shortcodes.php file, and then for it to start parsing text, right? That is essentially what's going on. It's one of the slowest performing dynamics in computing today, right? Especially in web computing. This notion that I'm going to parse text, figure out what it means, and then go act on it. You go, wow, that's expensive. And you go, right. So if you have 100 shortcodes on your page is going to get slow. But shortcodes are not the only way to make something happen. You can also just go into HTML and write that. You can also create, you can register events and code functions against TinyMC's buttons, right? So you can go and register and say, ooh, I want. So if you're looking at the editor in the classic WordPress that we have today, in that little editor, there's a little, like icon that you click on that says show me more rows of the editor. And when you do that, you can even add little buttons there. And then, of course, if you want to embed stuff like a YouTube video, you can just drop in the URL and that will trigger internal shortcodes that do other things. And so one of the things that happens when you start talking about this is you realize WordPress has allowed for a ton of different ways for you to do something. Now, when you think about that, you realize that also means there's a ton of different ways for things to break, and there's no guarantee that every plugin or every theme will know to pay attention to the particular kind of way that someone else's plugin or theme is breaking to escape that or to handle that. And so what tends to happen is you have this, a typical WordPress website may have 20 to 40 plugins, and they're all competing for how they want to get their things done. Some of them being really respectful to others, others not. And then something breaks and you go, I don't know what's going on here, right? And so you go, well, what if we didn't require users to pick from 4 different ways? What if we didn't allow developers to build it in 4 different ways, right? What if we started narrowing how to get something done so that we could enable more things to be done, right? If you restrict, right, the degrees of freedom that you give, say, developers, builders, theme builders, plugin builders, how to shape what they're producing, then computers can do a whole lot more. They can check for things, they can pay attention to things, they can fix things, but also humans can go, ooh, I know how to do this because there's one consistent way to do things, right? So that's the notion of the block, right? It is one concept. It is one notion, the block, and it's a consistent approach for everyone, for end users and for developers, right? And that is, like I said before, right? That's more than just about content creation. That's more than just about writing an article. That's about how you deliver features. It's about how you expose and express those features. It's about how you expose and express dynamics related to presentation. You start thinking about it, right? What does an ad have to do with a picture, have to do with text on your screen, right? They each have their own modalities. They each have their own approaches to how they do things. And yet, imagine if you had a consistent approach for all of them, right? And you go, oh, that's what we're going to call a block. And you go, that's interesting, and that's different. And yeah, that's more than just how do we tweak or change how we make something italic or how we embed a video, right? It's bigger than just how you create that content, right? So what can be a block, right? Well, everything, right? A paragraph can be a block. A photo could be a block. Now, here's the crazy thing. A collection of paragraphs could be a block, and a collection of photos, like a gallery, could be a block. An embedded video would be a block, and even an ad would be a block. And you go, okay, then really it is more than just and this is the case I'm making to you, right? This is more than just, ooh, it's the new content editor. Because if you can take things that literally exist in different parts of WordPress, right? You go into posts for posts and pages for pages, but those two are basically the same thing. But then you go into media and you're like, that's different. And you go, right. But imagine if a post is a block and media is a block and pages are a block. And then you're like, oh, wait, hold on. Ads? That's normally the plugin world, right? And you go, yep, nope, it's block, right? And how we treat it. We're going to treat an ad in terms of how we present it, where we present it, the conditions by which we present it. We would be able to put all the same constraints on that ad as we would a paragraph. Now think about that, right? On the one hand, what that means is that you could put an ad anywhere you put your paragraph, right? Which is awesome, because then you're not like, oh, my ad has to sit in the sidebar off to the side. You're like, no, I can make my ad be, like paragraph 3 or paragraph 7 or whatever, right? And so you can put ads where paragraphs are, right? But it also means that the display dynamics, right? And I'm not saying this is all rolling out tomorrow, but the display dynamics related to an ad, right? Conditional displaying, only show this ad if they visited this page, only show this ad if they've purchased this product, only show this ad if. You could also apply visibility rules in the same way that you do to a block that's an ad. You could do that to a paragraph. So imagine if you're able to start conditionally changing what content shows up and doesn't show up based on the same kind of rules that you use for an ad. And now you start going, wow, okay, so this is a wholesale change to how we think about content, wholesale change to how we think about presentation. It's okay, yeah, no, I get it. You made the case. It is more than just a content editor, right? Gutenberg is a fundamental refactoring of WordPress to help take it into what the next 10 years of publishing looks like, right? It is a dramatically different infrastructure to compete in a dramatically different time. Because today, right, even if you go to a Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, right, the solutions you're looking at are solutions that say, let me move things around, right? That's the extent of it, right? Wow, let me just move things around to make them look prettier. And you go, oh, that's a layout solution. If we wanted to go after a layout solution, there's a lot of ways to go after that, but that's why you can quickly look at what the folks that are working on Gutenberg are doing versus the folks that are working on anything else, and you go, no, they're doing way more than just layout, right? They are doing way more than just presentation. They are fundamentally working at this, trying to distill everything down to some core building blocks, this notion of blocks, so that they can then ascribe certain rules to them, and those rules can have benefits on either sides of whether they're things that are one time, presented or things that are consistently presented. We can change the nature of how things are presented, right? Rather than being contained in the architecture of a page or a post, you could create content that sits outside of it and then gets dropped into pages and posts depending on other conditions. I mean, this is what we expect of the next generation of content, right? We expect that we should be able to create dynamic blocks of anything and then place them dynamically in other places. And you go, right. And that is a layout issue, but in order to do it, you need a completely different underlying block-based engine. Hopefully that makes sense, right? I think we have a place where people will be able to ask questions, and we'll get to some of that towards the end. This is a different ballgame, right? This is a different ballgame because of what we're doing, right? So I think I've made this point now, right? While it is true that it will change your content creation experience in the long run, this is gonna change far more than just your editor, right? This is going to impact how we think about producing an entire website, right? That it's not just about being able to say, ooh, I can make a nicer, prettier post or page. Like we've had page builders, right? I use Beaver Builder to do that all the time. This is not solving a Beaver Builder problem, right? This is solving a different problem. And it's a problem that is one that is on the horizon, that the good folks that are all, I mean, there's a core team working on this, there's a Gutenberg team working on this, but there's a whole bunch of other people. And then there's people that they're just building their own themes and plugins that are also participating in creating this entire community of folks that are helping make this shift. And sometimes I think, okay, I don't think everybody understands fully what's going on here, but those that do and what they're working on, right, can have a tremendous impact on how we pursue content and what the expectations are around content in the future, right? Which, if you know me, right, you know I'm old school, started building web stuff in 94 and 95. So I remember SGML, which was the broader umbrella that was above HTML, which was a specific implementation of a markup language. That's what the ML stands for, in case you didn't know. And I remember the promise, right? In 1995 and 96, what we were talking about was this notion of semantics, so that you didn't put, right? You have to have come from a certain perspective to remember that at one point, right, we were putting eyes and Bs for italics and bolds around text. We were decorating text, right? The problem is that when you decorate text, when you just put, and we can do this with CSS class today, when you just put strong or you just put emphasis today around text, you don't put any meaning there. You simply are making it look a certain way. And the point of markup was so that we could distinguish different things and the meaning, the semantics around the content more than just the presentation of the content. That was the promise of HTML. That was the promise of HTML, that we could essentially take all sorts of research and other content we were producing for the web, right? And we could publish it in a way that didn't focus on just presentation, but focused on meaning, right? And therefore, because we were able to put the semantics around it, it would allow us to express intention. This is what I want you to think about this thing or do this, right? Now, you will listen to that as a recollection of an old person who is trying to tell you that life was better in the old days. And I'll be honest, right? No, life is really good right now, right? Because blocks are at a higher abstraction level than the HTML below it. Blocks allow us as a construct to literally embed the block with semantics all over again and store the intention that we always wanted. Now, what do I mean by that, right? You're like, well, explain, right? Because you're talking about semantics and intention, and those are big words that don't mean a lot. What I'm telling you is that right now, if I created different pages in a real estate website where I had real estate agents, I might have a set of CSS classes that present that agent the same way, but there's very little on the page that tells you it's an agent or that tells you it's a person, right? The structural notion of the fact that that's a person is not apparent in the HTML that's produced, which means if I wanted another little engine to run by and change certain things about all the people on my site, which would include those agents, but might also include in a different about page my team, which also is a team construct, which has a organizational hierarchy of not only the team, but inside each team is a team member. And by the way, that team member is a person, right? That structured notion of people there and people as agents, that I could tell one bit of code to go change and transform this, and all the people would be changed differently, right? All of the people would have bigger photos, or all of the people would have more bios, or all the people would have something else, right? I can't do that today because I don't know what people are on your website, and I don't even know what the construct is. And in fact, the closest we get right now is the stylings of CSS that allow us to say, oh, well, if I put person class on all of them, then I could do something. And you go, yeah, but that's not the same thing. Like, we have ways to jury rig around it, but there is very little for us to do in the world of publishing today that allows us to put back semantics and intention, what people were interested in doing and how they were categorizing, shaping content in such a way that you could use engines and not people to go do other things, to create manipulations, right? And that's what blocks gives us, right? Blocks gives us the ability to say this block, when someone uses this block, it means something. They're using a block for a testimonial, or they're using a block for a quote, or they're using a block for a person, or they're using a block for it. They're using this block, and that means that they mean something and that they intend something. And that gets stored in the same semantic articulation, the same richness of the display, so that later, if I wanted an engine to run through all of this, right, they would go, oh, okay, yeah, we can go and make tweaks and changes, right? Hopefully that makes sense, because I don't know how to explain it better than to say this is what we've been hoping for and wanting a long time. And if you're involved in publishing, if you're involved in thinking about where it's going, you go, yeah, this is what we'd want. So when we talk about Gutenberg, all right, the two things I hear the most, right, the two questions I get the most are the question of, hey, is this going to break my site, right? Especially we're talking about preparing for Gutenberg. Is this going to break my site? And is it going to be hard to learn, right? Because if it's hard to learn, I'm going to start looking around, right? And if it's going to break my site, I'm going to start looking around, right? And the good news is it's not going to break your site, and using Gutenberg is not hard to learn, Okay, so that's the good news, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you Gutenberg, right? I find that's probably the easiest and best way. And if I've scared you with HTML and semantic intent, I'm going to show you that, hey, there's no reason to be scared because it really is super easy. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, if this works out right, is I'm going to change the screen that I'm sharing. And you should now be looking at the back end of the admin side of a WordPress website. I think that's what you're seeing. And so what I want to show you right here, right? And I think I'm zoomed in enough, but let me zoom in one more time. Let's see if that helps it so that you can really see what's going on, right? What you'll see here is that I have no other plugins installed but Gutenberg. And if you didn't know, right now, Gutenberg is a plugin. In the long run, in another, as they finish working on this, it will be a feature of the core of WordPress. But right now, you can test it out by installing a plugin. How would you do that? Right? You go into the plugins area, you'd hit add new. When you hit add new, you could do a search for Gutenberg. And when you do that search, you're going to see it, right? There's the logo, right? Nice looking thing with a G in the middle of it. And you could hit, right? Like all these others, you can install now, and then you can activate it, right? You can see 10,000 people are testing it out, right? That's fun and that's good news because we're still in the early phases of getting this all tested out before it goes live. But while we're here, I should note a couple of things, right? This is a maps block. This is a custom fields block. These are some stackable blocks. This is how to disable it. This is a spacer block. These are advanced blocks, a whole series of them, right? This is I take it this is a user submitted post block, though I don't see block or Gutenberg in this. Block, no, that's different. There's a bunch of others, right? This is the classic editor, right? Which means if you find out, and we'll talk about this later, but if you find out that Gutenberg is breaking your site, you can definitely install the classic editor and go back to it, right? But here's code blocks, right? Gutenberg blocks for content marketers, right? So what you're going to discover is that there's a whole bunch of different blocks that are available, right? What I'm going to do is just install one of these right now and activate it just so we can talk about how this plays out, okay? But these are blocks, right? And you'll see here when I activate it, the array themes guys, which are awesome, right? They're like, hey, here's how to use these and working with these, right? So that's all good. But now when I come into the plugins, you're going to see I only have two plugins here, right? Gutenberg itself and the atomic blocks, okay? Now, when I look at pages, you'll see because this was a default installation, there's a sample page, right? And when I look at the sample page, what you're going to see is that, and this is how you know that Gutenberg's not going to break most of our sites, is that it takes the entire page of content and drops it into one block, right? So therefore, the likelihood that your site is going to break when you activate Gutenberg or when it goes live, right, is lower because they haven't tried to dynamically convert every post and page you have into a Gutenberg post or page, right? They haven't done that. So they just went, ooh, let's take all this stuff, drop it into one, move on. If you don't edit this page, it just stays like this and it'll present just like it always has, right? And so if we come over here and we open it up to take a look in another browser, you're going to go, oh yeah, that looks exactly like it was supposed to look from the beginning, right? Nothing has really changed just because I was using Gutenberg. So that's one of the questions, right, that people ask all the time is, hey, is this going to break my site? It shouldn't. Now, I can't guarantee that it won't because, as you and I both know, there's a whole bunch of plugins out there and a bunch of themes out there that do things kind of an interesting way. And because we don't know exactly what they've done, we can't prove that they won't harm something, right? But for the most part, right? Most of your posts and pages should load in the same way that this sample page did, and you should have no problem, okay? So what we're gonna do to answer the other question, right? One question is it gonna break my site? And the answer is no, shouldn't. The next question is it hard to learn? So I'm gonna hit add new, and I'm gonna show you the new editor, right? And the new editor doesn't look dramatically different than the old editor, except that instead of seeing that little like, hey, write your story in a box, now you have this nice breathable open space to write your whole article, right? You still have a sidebar, though the sidebar is a little bit different. You have a sidebar component for your block, right, which is definitely different. And you'll see there's a nice title and a write your story, and this plus sign is the adding more blocks, right? But I want to show you how easy it is to write a regular post, right? First, let's just start simple. So I come over here and I go, how to pick a good cigar, all right? That's my title. I click in here to start writing. When I click in here, right, you're gonna notice immediately on the right-hand side, hey, you're in the paragraph block, and that you have settings for font sizes and colors and drop caps and all this other stuff, right? But I'm like, no, hey, I'm just gonna type, right? So most people are scared to smoke a cigar for fear they'll get sick. Mostly because they don't know which is the right cigar for them. Now watch what I'm about to do. I hit enter, and it just gives me a new paragraph, right? That's what you'd expect it to do. It's exactly what you'd expect it to do. So I just go, okay. Today, what we're going to be looking at is how to pick the right cigar for you. Boom. Now, what's happening when I move my mouse is that I see, ooh, this is a block. This is a block. This now new is another block. Just by hitting enter, I'm creating one paragraph block after another, right? So let's of course you're going to go, yeah, but what if I'm not writing paragraphs? Well, let's play that out, right? So how to pick the right cigar for you. And I'm going to say you might like cigars that last for a long time. You might like cigars that are quick. You might like cigars that have a strong flavor. You might like cigars that don't have a strong. All right, now you're going, yeah, but Chris, you're not really going to write 4 paragraphs like that. And you go, nope. What did I do? I just dragged my mouse over all the text. And here you see a new kind of, hey, this is a hamburger menu that doesn't look like a hamburger menu. These 3 dots that are vertical, let me look at more options. And I can transform 4 paragraph blocks into 1 list block. That's magic, right? That's magic because, again, what we're saying is, hey, you had these blocks. They had a certain expressed intention. That intention was paragraphs. And then we said, well, do you want to transform it into a different intention? And you go, yeah, that's what I'd like to do. Please transform it. And behind the scenes in femtoseconds, it was transformed, right? Just like that. And you go, wow, that is incredible, right? And then you'll see right here in the same way that if I come over to my paragraph, I get options immediately to edit, right? As I move my mouse. And so you go, oh, I could change that to number, to ordered and unordered, right? I can indent, I can make these bolds, right? I could come in here and just go, hey, you want them to last for a long time, or that are quick, or strong flavor, or don't have a strong flavor, right? I don't like that, right? I would say, right? So then I go strong flavor and I have light flavor, right? Oh. And you're going, yeah, okay, that doesn't feel so bad. Remember, I asked you, right? Or I told you that most people, one of the questions they have is this hard to learn? And you go, no, from the looks of it, right? You go, this isn't hard at all. This is actually pretty darn easy. because I just come in here and I go, okay, I can just keep hitting enter and doing stuff, right? You go, yep, that's right. Now, what if I wanted to take this title, right? What if I wanted to take this title and I wanted to change it, right? Or what if I wanted to put a a call to action or some other, like maybe let's go down here actually and let's create some notion of a a content upgrade, right? So I go download my free guide on learning the right way to light. If you didn't know, I really like cigars, right? Light a cigar. So this you go, okay, this is something that's special. It's pulled out of the rest of my content. And so I come over here and I go, let's give me some background color, right? And I'm like, let's go with orange, right? And now if I say, hey, what about, blue or maybe black, right? Actually, let's go with black and gray or black. Let's see. What I'm definitely not triggering the thing that I thought would trigger. So, uh, something should have triggered right there, and I don't see why it didn't. Though, of course, I see why that didn't trigger because that looks great. But one of the things I really like, which I'm in demo mode, so it's reasonable that this would not trigger. And it may be because I have it zoomed in so much. Let's see if I zoom out just a little bit. Does it? That's strange. All right, well, I'll just tell you what should have happened, right? See how this is really hard to read? There is automatically a check here that for some reason isn't triggering, that for accessibility, it looks at this and says, hey, heads up, this is really hard to read. And so there's an automatic check for that sensibility, right? For that, if you're creating content, one of the things they've done is looked at visual contrast and automatically triggered a way for you to go, hey, heads up, you're using a dark color background with a dark colored text. This is not helpful to you, right? And you go, oh, okay, that's good. For some reason, it didn't trigger, and I don't know why. But it's the nature of a demo. I'll figure it out shortly. So, but what you just saw, right, was that I was able to take something that normally I would need a page builder to do, right? And you go, no, or I had to write CSS, right? And I go, nope. I just changed the background color, changed the text color. I'm good to go, right? And you go, okay, well, that's interesting. What else can you do? And you go, well, we haven't even clicked on this add block button yet, right? We've just been hitting enter and just getting more paragraph ones, right? But when I click on the plus, I get a whole bunch of different blocks. And we're gonna sit here for a second and talk a little about some of these. The one, of course, is the notion of an image, right? I can click an image here, go to the media library, find an image that looks right. That one looks good, right? And I can drop in this image. Now, I can also write the caption. I can decide, do I want to center align it, right? I can even determine if I want to convert it into a gallery if I have more articles. I can come in here and affect width, right? And say, do I want, which version of this do I want it to be? And then, I want to set this up for 100%, right? And you're gonna go, okay, what does this look like? So let's hit publish, right? And open this up over here, right? And you're gonna go, it looks really similar to what we were looking at before, right? Now, what if I wanted this to be wider? Because notice that I'm not seeing any kind of sidebar here. Well, that is more a function, right, of your actual theme. Now, I'm using the Astra theme, but one of the things I know about the Astra theme, right, is that I have the option to say, hey, in my layout, I want to make it full width but constrained, right? And I'm going to hit update here. And immediately when I come back over here, right? Oh, almost worked. I forgot to take away, 1 second here. No sidebar, sorry. Right? And now look what happened. my text, now there is some constraint, right? So it's not going all the way. I'm not seeing text all the way at the edge, but suddenly this is looking different, right? Because I have the ability to control. That is theme related. And one of the things that often you have to think through or pay attention to is this notion that Gutenberg is going to give you full screen access, full width to be able to do different things, but it's still constrained by the notion of what your what your theme lets it do, right? So this is an Astra theme. It is a free theme. It is a super fast and lightweight theme, and it works well with page builders and everything else. So I have those options over here to say, hey, get rid of stuff, and that works for me, right? But I can come back over here. I can make it left aligned. I can add more images and turn it into a gallery, right? I can add a caption, but that's stuff we normally do, right? You normally expect to be able to add an image and not have much hassle. You notice when I come into the block settings for this, that's where I get my text alternative, right? So again, for accessibility, I always want to make sure I have, right? This is a woman lighting her cigar with $100 bill, right? And I can come in here and manipulate all these items, but that's images. And you go, yeah, okay, I know how to use images, right? That's not a big deal. But what happens if I want to move this image above? And you'll see here when I roll my mouse over that I get this up and down, right? So the reality is I can move these guys up and down, right? I can have an impact on how I want the order of these guys to display, right? Let's see. What I really want to do is just bring it down. So I'm going to just drag it, but I can't. Nope. I keep getting it to layer inside it. So let's see if I can just move this guy up. Oh, we're having fun. Normally the arrows do just what I want it to do, right? Yep, works there. Like I said, we're still testing, right? I will leave that alone for now. But there are other kind of blocks, right? So we haven't gotten into. There are other blocks that we can play with. Quotes, right? Come in here, and for some reason this is I don't want it there. So hold on. This photo is giving me an issue, and I don't know why. It's at full. So we'll come down here, right? And we'll just come to a quote, right? I get a quote. Again, I don't know how many people have actually had to install testimonial plugins just so they can get a nice looking testimonial, right? In their poster page, right? And so you can write a quote. And you can just you're like, wow, I don't have to do, there's a button guy in here, right? Again, I can't tell you the number of times people that I've worked with, people that are like, I need a button plugin. You're like, a button plugin? And you're like, yeah. And you're like, you can just make button with a little bit of CSS. You're like, yeah, I don't know any of that. I don't know any code. I don't want to touch any code. And you go, right. But part of what you're getting, right, is you're getting something that says all of these are still completely and totally blocks, right? These are all this button, this quote, this photo, this paragraph, this content, upgrade, these paragraphs, this title, they are all blocks. So how I address them, how I interact with them, what I can do with them, I get one single unified model for all the different dynamics that are going to show up on a page and how they're going to work, right? And that is extremely powerful. So, there's a whole bunch of these guys, and again, I can move this guy above the quote, right? And so here, download this thing quick, right, before we do this stuff. And there's a lot of options here. I can take this button, right, and go, hey, no, I want it to stand out, right? So change the color of the button, and you'll notice I haven't written any code, right? Haven't written any code whatsoever, and I'm pulling things together. Now, I know you're likely to say, Chris, this is not the most beautiful of all pages. And you go, right, that's true. There's still experimental things, right? So when I come over here, you'll see that the columns in here says it's experimental. And right now, it's like 2 columns. I'm not sure I've figured out how to do 3 or 4. But there are other, right? There are other solutions in here. The nice thing is when you get to embeds, right? You can embed YouTube. You can embed, there's a whole bunch of things in here that you're like, oh, I never really thought about how I would embed or what I would do to embed this stuff, right? And you go, yeah, no, it's really easy, super fun, right? I don't think I've ever put Meetup into a page, right? But you're like, but you can, right? So there is a whole bunch of stuff that you're getting, and especially the ease of which you're able to add these things without adding any plugins or needing a theme, right? I know a lot of people that are like, well, I need a theme that'll give me the buttons, that'll give me the callouts, that'll give me the alerts, that'll give me all these things because I don't know how to do it. I don't want to write the code. And you go, yeah, one of the benefits of what's happening in the Gutenberg era here is that both the core team and others are creating blocks, and those blocks have options so that you just click those options and suddenly you have it, right? You have it, you're good to go, and you're done, right? So I can hit update now and go take a look at this guy. And when I do, right, you will see, hey, there's my button, there's my quote, right? Here's my, content upgrade. I get all of that pretty cleanly, right? Pretty cleanly without having to do a lot. So that's how easy. Remember, I was answering the question, right? Is it easy to learn? Yes, it is very easy to learn. Will it replace a complete will it replace a complete Beaver builder, a page builder, whatever? I don't think it will exactly, because I don't think that's its intention, right? It is not just focused on layout. It is a rendering engine for, with a single consolidated approach for all your content and all the different components of what goes into a WordPress site. And so its agenda is both more focused than layout, but also more applicable broadly across more of WordPress than anything else, right? So the very nature is most people will ask, if we were asking a third question, is, well, so how does this work with my other page builders? How does this work with my other theme frameworks? The truth is, you're gonna want to test everything, right? You're gonna want to test this. I have found that in many cases, it's not going to impact a lot of it, right? Because your theme wasn't so egregious as to jump into your content and make changes. So because of the way this is done, it's not harming anything, right? Let's take a look at this particular page, right? If I wanted to, let's go over here and let's take a look at it in the classic editor, right? And click over. What you're seeing is that all of that semantic dynamics that I was telling you about, they're stored in comments. So unless you're using a really strange framework for a theme, or you're using a really strange page builder that freaks out at comments, it's going to do nothing, right? It's just going to look at the paragraph and go, okay, these are paragraphs. I'm going to show you what a paragraph looks like, and these are list items, and I'm going to show you those list items. So you're not going to get a lot of challenge. A lot of times people are like, well, wait, this is going to ruin everything I've done. No, it shouldn't. But on top of that, if I was using this with Genesis, or if I was using this with another theme framework, I wouldn't suddenly go, oh, it's going to break it, right? Divi, if I had this running and I was running either Divi plugin or the Divi theme, it would just ignore the comments, right? There's nothing there that you go, oh, this is going to ruin it, right? You go, no, this is all pretty clean and seamless. Not a lot to it. I know a lot of people don't like to look at the underlying code of it, right? But what you're seeing is you're going, okay, yep, it's a button that just suddenly doesn't look as cool as it used to if I killed Gutenberg. But you're like, no, not a big deal, right? So in reality, right, Gutenberg gives us a lot, doesn't take away a lot, and sets us up downstream for a much more interesting and compelling way to create content, right? The way that we would expect content to play out in the future, right? So things to note as we get ready to wrap this up. You can test it today as a plugin, right? You can download the Gutenberg plugin. I showed you how, and you can check it out, right? It will be part of the core release in 5.0, but we don't have a date for 5.0. So we don't know when that's going to play out. And if you have issues, as I showed you when I was looking over the plugins, there is a classic editor, right? So if you are one of those folks that's doing something really different, you could say, okay, but still, right? We're gonna be okay. There's not, we're not gonna be in a situation where everything falls apart and I can't do anything. You go, no. There's the classic editor will allow you to get through that, right? My name is Chris Lema. As I mentioned before, I work at Liquid Web. I'm the VP of products over there, and on Twitter I am at Chris Lema. And with that, we'll open it up for questions. I'm going to meander down to the questions section. All right. So the first question is, hey, once Gutenberg is fully implemented, will that be the standard in place of the editor? Yes, that is the expectation, that when everything is done and it's part of the 5.0 release, that it will be the editor there. There won't be a classic editor unless you install that plugin to let you do it. Jenny says, it sounds like Drupal. Well, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. But I'm going to leave that there because it's not really a question. So the next one is, how will this affect current editors? Beaver or Site Origin, etc. And of course, Cherry, Genesis, etc. frameworks. So we also hit on that. It should not have you should not have a big problem putting it on any kind of theme framework unless your theme framework is doing something really strange and odd. And your current editors, your current ability to do page building stuff, you should still be able to do that. That's not a big deal. The reality is, it just means that you're not going to put a lot of Gutenberg semantic into it, right? You're going to just go and say, hey, make this page a Beaver Builder page, and then you're going to do all the things you would, and it'll present it all the way you would. So shouldn't be a problem there, right? Philip says, my company builds sites that bypass the content editor altogether and uses ACF to allow our clients to create a page from a series of modules. This is because the sites we build are complex and not just big text blocks for content. From what it looks like, it will dramatically change our workflow. I don't see meta fields or their use here. Are they any baked in features for custom fields, or is that being removed? So I think you are still going to be fine. Here's why. They are working on meta field stuff. And there's already some work done for custom fields, and there's some custom field blocks. I think we saw one as we were navigating some of the plugins. And I think I remember reading recently that the folks behind ACF, right, were working on something with Gutenberg. So I think everybody, a year ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said, well, I'm nervous too, because I haven't seen any work done on meta boxes. Over the last year, we've seen a lot of movement and a lot of adjustments and tweaks and stuff. So I think you might still be okay, but I can't guarantee that your workflow won't change. It might be different. Images floating left. That's why the arrow plus showing. Yeah. So I guessed at that, and that's why we put it to the middle and moved on in life. But thank you for catching that. What about my SEO plugins, right? Will this mess with the SEO I've set up on my, on a few hundred sites? Well, look, honestly, I can't tell you that it will or that it won't, but I know that the guys behind WP SEO, right, the Yoast team, is heavily involved in working through a lot of this. So I would hope that it's okay. The next question is tables. And yes, I forgot to show you tables, but yes, there is a native block that is a table. If you've ever been like, oh, I wish I could do tables without having to go get a plugin and just to create a small little table, you can totally do a table as a block, as a native component of the new Gutenberg. You can create a block that is a table and start just filling in the table, right? And you can even tell the table whether you want the column widths to be fluid or whether you want it to lock it down, right? I mean, it's very cool. Um, okay, Chris, how do you determine what blocks are shown based on certain criteria? So that is a great question, and it's probably the only thing that I'm still a little. I think there's still more to do. I don't know that people have spent enough time, and I never want to say anything that maligns the good name of all the people that are working super hard on Gutenberg. But I just feel like the current model for that, you click a button and you get that little tiny modal screen, and then you're like, well, what happens if I have 100 or 200 blocks? And you're like, well, then you have to search. And you're like, great. So what happens if I search and I see 5 testimonials? How do I figure out which one's which? Or how do I know which is the one I used last time? And so there's still some work there on usability that I think, it's not yet done. The good news is these guys continue to iterate over and over and over again. And so I think, or I hope that we will get stuff moving from there. But thanks for asking that good question, Denise. How does Gutenberg handle advanced custom fields on a page? Great question, Cliff. I think I addressed that just recently. Like, hey, I think that ACF is working on it. You'd have to check in with them. I don't know all the details of how ACF is playing with Gutenberg. So this seems like it's geared towards, Philip writes, geared towards content creators and bloggers. I could be wrong here because my perspective is commercial sites. Are they drifting away from being more of a catch-all to focus on blogging and content creation? That's a great question. And I think the answer is no, but that's my particular take. And the reason I think the answer is no is based on some of the stuff I was talking about earlier. The fact that I can capture semantics, the fact that I can understand intention means that I can create blocks that do other things. And then I can trigger how those blocks function and work, right? And everything can be a block. This is why I use the common dynamic of an ad, right? Because an ad typically functions very different than the way your content does, but an ad could be a block. And so suddenly you could have it do certain things it couldn't do before, couldn't do easily. So I think they're thinking about this in a much deeper way. This is one of the challenges I've had with the Gutenberg team, and I have very few, but one of them is I feel like the way they write about it or talk about it is very content centric, and I understand they're trying not to scare people on, oh, we're refactoring all of WordPress, but fundamentally what you see beneath it, you go, no, there's a lot here that could be for far more complicated solutions and commercial sites that aren't just about, a pretty piece of text. So I don't think they're steering away from that. I just think how they've shaped the communication and how they're rolling it out is more in that direction, right? Okay, another question on advanced custom fields. I think I've answered that now twice. Okay, can you explain more about setting conditions in blocks, right? Showing if it's logged into an account. So I should be more explicit and clear. It's not that the dynamicism of a block's display as it relates to certain conditions are something that is there today. It is completely viable today. It's not in one of these guys. So you can't come into a paragraph and then go to the section, right? And say, oh, where's my display rules? They don't have display rules right now for that paragraph. So, but there's nothing that would stop us, right? Now that you have one modality, one dynamic, one framework for how you interact with these things, you could create display mechanisms against it, and it would be available for many of the blocks, right? Simply because of that. So that's what I'm talking about, more than that there's a setting somewhere that I didn't show you, all right? Someone else, Diane said, hey, we use Visual Composer on most of our pages. What will happen to those? I think the default, because Visual Composer uses a lot of shortcodes, is that it would just stuff all the shortcodes into one. Remember I showed you that classic, that first pass of it where you go, here it is, right? I think it'll leave it there and everything will be fine. I think if you go to edit it, you're going to get into this dynamic where you're like, okay, how do I want to play this out? But my understanding is that those guys are definitely working on and figuring out how that plays out. But initially, were you to go take the Gutenberg plugin today and activate it on your Visual Composer site, I don't think anything would break. That's just my guess. You'd have to double check that. Native table block sounds awesome. I agree, Philip. I think that it is super awesome. Can a block be saved and reused elsewhere? Oh, I can't believe I didn't show you that. But yes, it totally can. So you can create this whole little component of content, right? Wrap it up, save it, and then reuse it in a lot of places, which is, again, exactly what you'd imagine you could do with blocks, right? And then Robert said, "Hey, can you put blocks next to each other side by side on a page?" So yes, there's a text component that lets you do columns and lets you put text next to text. There is the new, I showed you columns, which is experimental. I think in the long run, that's how they're gonna go after it, right? But it is still experimental, so we'll see as that iterates through how you can put different blocks next to each other, right? Okay, so can you explain more about the storing of intent in the blocks? So yeah, sorry. Let me try one more time. And it's possible I'm just a really bad explainer at this, or it's possible that because not a lot of people are talking about this, there's just not a lot of examples. But I created a quote, right? That quote, that text was italic text with regular text below it, right? In a normal dynamic, what would happen on a regular page would produce HTML. That HTML would have text that was italic and then text that wasn't. And when you're looking at that page at that point, when it's presented as HTML to the user, the notion that it was a testimonial would be gone, right? The only way you would know it was a testimonial was if the div containing it had something like testimonial as one of the classes, right? And of course, you could have 3 different testimonial plugins, and one of them calls it quote, one of them calls it testimonial, and one of them calls it something else, right? The name of the plugin. And you're like, when I talk about intent, you remember that when I went to the classic editor and looked at any one of these pieces, including that quote, you saw that in comments, the comment blocks around it articulated what it was, right? It said, oh, this is a testimonial or this is a quote. And that's what I'm saying. It's storing it. The intent of that block is being stored in a comment connected to that block in the HTML that gets presented, right? But also so that if I wanted another engine to run across all my content, find every place where I have, said I want to deal with, quotes or testimonials or whatever, and I can change it, I can do that. Now, again, some people say, yeah, but you can do that with CSS, and you go, yes, if your intent is to make a visual change, if your intent is to do other things, it's harder, and it's harder if you're using, and sad to say, right? But I've seen, not so much with testimonials, but I've definitely seen people with forms or sliders where they have 2 or 3 of those same plugins, right? And so now suddenly you're like, well, no, I can't do all forms because it's not all forms. I can do all Ninja forms or all Gravity forms, but not all forms, right? Brad says, hey, are you able to add a background image to a block, or is that still going to be handled by the theme? That's a great question. I don't think I've tried to do that yet, so I don't know, and I will look it up, right? Akamai says, hey, I have a Bootstrap shortcode plugin that gives me options to style quotes, lists, columns, etc. Now that's built into Gutenberg. Will that override the Bootstrap plugin, or is it still going to work? The best thing I can tell you in that scenario is test all the things, right? That is your best way to do this. Denise said, hey, can the blocks be named, right? And in general, I don't, trying to think if I've seen any place where by default they're named, and I don't think that's the case. But that said, I think the other dynamic is when you go to when you create a shared component, you might be able to name it there, right? But in the default for the blocks, I haven't seen a lot of naming, right? When you save it, can you give it a dedicated name? So that's one of the questions we'll have to look for, right? So Joseph, I'll figure that out. But I think you can name it when you're saving it. But I don't think it. I think in general you're not naming the blocks because they are, again, they're the semantic of what you're intending to do. So it's a paragraph or it's a quote or it's a whatever, right? Let's see. Robert wants to know about blocks for sliders, etc. Right? There will be blocks for a ton of things, right? The other day, I went in and did a look inside of plugins for Gutenberg, and then just said, how many plugins are there that are Gutenberg related, right? And I found very quickly, I found 30 different plugins for blocks, and each of those plugins either had only one block or had up to like 10 or 15 blocks in them, right? So I have no question that people are going to create blocks for everything, including sliders. And look at that, we just hit my 11 o'clock, which was the last question, and time to wrap this up. So I will say thank you. Hope you guys had a good time and learned a bunch. And again, if you had to cut out or miss any part of this, if you came late, there is a recording and the PDF of the slides that we will send out to you guys. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.